Imagine every single person on Earth, all 8 billion of us, each solving one maths equation every second, without stopping for 7 full years. That's roughly how many calculations the world's fastest supercomputer completes in a single second. Not a year, not a day, 1 second. Today, I want to find out what these machines actually are, how they work, and why they matter to you, even if you've never set foot near one. My guest is a computational scientist who has spent years working on high-performance computing systems and making sense of what they can and can't do. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, and I love that opener because people's first reaction is always, "That's impossible." But it's not. And what's even wilder is that these machines exist right now. They're getting faster every year. And most people have no idea they're already benefiting from them every single day.
Before we get into the details, tell me a little about your background. How did you end up working in this world?
I started in physics. I wanted to understand how galaxies form. And you very quickly hit a wall where the maths is just too complex to solve by hand, or even on a regular computer. So I got pulled into the computing side. How do you actually build and run the tools that let you simulate a billion galaxies at once? That's been my career ever since.
So for someone who has genuinely never heard this term before, what is a supercomputer in the plainest possible words?
A supercomputer is a machine built to solve problems that a normal computer couldn't finish in your lifetime. The key difference isn't just speed, it's how they work. Your laptop does one thing at a time, very fast. A supercomputer does millions of things simultaneously by splitting a massive problem into tiny chunks and handing each chunk to a different processor. Think of it like this. If you need to count all the grains of sand on a beach, one person doing it alone would take forever. But if you bring in 100,000 people, each counting a small patch, you get the answer in an afternoon. That's parallel processing, and it's the heart of how supercomputers work.
So hang on, it's not just a really, really fast laptop?
Exactly, and that's the most common misconception. It's not just about clock speed. The architecture is completely different. A modern supercomputer might have hundreds of thousands of processors, each one comparable to what's in a high-end gaming PC, all working together, connected by incredibly fast internal networks. The Frontier supercomputer in Tennessee has over 600 million processor cores. It's less like a very fast laptop and more like an entire city of computers thinking as one.
You mentioned these machines measure performance in something called exaflops. I've heard that word. What does it actually mean?
FLOPS stands for floating point operations per second. It's just a count of how many maths calculations a machine can do in 1 second. Your home laptop might do a few hundred billion flops, which sounds impressive until you hear that 1 exaflop is 1 quintillion operations per second. That's a 1 followed by 18 zeros. We crossed that threshold for the first time in 2022 with a machine called Frontier. And as of 2025, the fastest machine in the world, El Capitan at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California, hits 1.742 exaflops.
I'm going to need a real-world comparison because my brain just went blank at quintillion.
Here's one that always lands. If you took the world's population, 8 billion people, and had every single one of them perform one mathematical calculation every second, around the clock, without sleeping, you'd need all of them doing that for more than 7 straight years to match what El Capitan does in 1 second. And this machine fits inside a building. That gap between human scale and machine scale is genuinely hard to hold in your head.
Okay, so we've established these things are staggeringly powerful. But what problems are actually worth that kind of power? What do researchers actually run on them?
The list is enormous, but let me give you 3 categories that really show the range. First, weather and climate. To forecast tomorrow's weather accurately, you need to model the entire atmosphere of the planet. Air pressure, humidity, ocean temperatures, all interacting, at a resolution fine enough to be useful. Supercomputers run those simulations continuously. Without them, your 5-day weather forecast would be little better than a guess. Second, drug discovery. Finding a drug that targets a specific protein in your body means simulating how millions of different molecules might interact with it at an atomic level. That's a problem so complex that it used to take decades. Supercomputers cut that timeline dramatically.
And the third?
Nuclear physics and fusion energy. Before we test anything in the real world, A new reactor design, a new material, we simulate it. Because if you're trying to build a fusion reactor that replicates the conditions inside a star, you can't just guess and see what happens. You simulate it thousands of times, across thousands of variations, until you understand the system. El Capitan was built partly for exactly this kind of work, modeling nuclear stockpile safety and inertial confinement fusion experiments.
I want to go back to something you mentioned, the link between supercomputers and everyday life. Is there a specific moment where that connection was really visible?
2020 is the perfect example. When COVID-19 hit, one of the urgent questions was, do masks actually work? Not in theory, but in practice, when someone coughs or speaks in a room. Japan's Fugaku supercomputer, at the time one of the fastest in the world, was tasked with simulating how airborne droplets move through different environments. It modeled the physics of tiny particles in the air in classrooms, in trains, in restaurants at different ventilation levels. And crucially, it showed clearly that masks did reduce transmission significantly, and it showed which settings were highest risk. That research directly influenced public health decisions. Not just in Japan, worldwide. One machine, running simulations for a few weeks, shaping policy that affected billions of people.
That's remarkable. And people had no idea that was happening in the background.
That's always the case. Supercomputers are infrastructure, like roads or the power grid. You don't see them, but the outputs of what they do are everywhere. In your weather app, in the medicines your doctor prescribes, in the safety of the aircraft you fly on, because every commercial plane design is tested in simulation before it's ever built.
There's something I want to push on because I think a lot of people are confused about the relationship between supercomputers and AI. When we talk about ChatGPT or image generators, are those running on supercomputers?
This is a genuinely important distinction. Training AI models, the phase where the AI learns from massive datasets, absolutely requires enormous computing power. Microsoft's Eagle system, for example, is essentially a cloud-based supercomputer built specifically for training large AI models. So yes, supercomputers are at the root of AI development. But when you're chatting with an AI tool on your phone, you're using inference, running a trained model, which is a very different, much lighter computational task. The supercomputer did the heavy lifting months or years before.
So the supercomputer is more like the factory that built the AI, not the AI itself running in your pocket.
That's a perfect way to put it. And what's exciting right now is that modern supercomputers are being designed to do both. Run traditional scientific simulations and train AI models on the same hardware. Frontier can do this. El Capitan can do this. That combination is unlocking a new generation of science where AI and simulation work together, where the AI learns patterns from the simulation data and helps guide the next round of experiments.
What's the thing most people get completely wrong about supercomputers?
That they're infinitely scalable, that we can just keep building bigger ones and the answers will keep getting better. The real limiting factor right now isn't processors or algorithms. It's energy. Frontier consumes about 21 megawatts of power, enough to supply electricity to roughly 15,000 homes. El Capitan is in a similar range. And we want to build machines 10 or 100 times more powerful. The numbers get uncomfortable very fast. The biggest bottleneck in pushing computing forward in 2025 isn't a chip problem. It's a power problem.
That surprises me. I'd have guessed it was about the chips themselves.
Chips are part of it, but even if we had perfect chips, we'd be asking, where does the electricity come from? Some facilities are looking at using waste heat from supercomputers to warm nearby buildings, which is clever, but it's not a solution to the underlying scale problem. There's real work happening on energy-efficient computing, quantum computing as a complement, and novel chip architectures. But anyone who tells you the path forward is simple is not looking at the power consumption numbers honestly.
That's a tension I hadn't thought about. We're building tools that help us tackle climate change, but they themselves have a significant energy footprint.
Exactly the right observation. And the field takes it seriously. The Green 500 list ranks supercomputers not just by speed, but by energy efficiency. Jupiter, Europe's new Exascale supercomputer, ranked fourth globally on speed, but is one of the top 5 on the Green 500 for efficiency. That balance matters. You want the most output per watt, not just the most output.
For a student watching this who might be thinking about a career in computing or science, where does supercomputing fit? Is it something they could actually work on?
Absolutely. And there's a growing access problem that's being solved right now, which makes it more reachable than ever. Historically, you needed to be at a national laboratory or a top university to get anywhere near a supercomputer. That's changed. Microsoft Azure's Eagle system makes high-performance computing accessible through the cloud, meaning a researcher at a small university or a startup can run workloads that would have required a national facility a decade ago. If you're a student interested in this space, the best entry point is learning parallel computing fundamentals. Understand how to write code that splits tasks across multiple processors. Languages and tools like Python with MPI, CUDA for GPU computing, or even just understanding how distributed systems work. Those are the skills that matter.
And what does the next decade look like? Where is this field going?
3 things I'd watch closely. First, quantum classical hybrid computing. Systems like Lumi in Finland are already partnered with quantum processors, trying to use quantum computers for the problems they're uniquely good at and classical supercomputers for everything else. Second, AI-accelerated science. The fusion of simulation and machine learning I mentioned earlier, which is already producing faster drug discoveries and better climate models. And third, the Exascale to Zetascale journey. We've only just crossed the Exascale threshold in the last few years. Zetascale, 1,000 times more powerful, is where the next decade's ambitions sit. What becomes possible at that scale is something we genuinely can't fully predict yet.
That's a genuinely exciting place to leave things. One last question. If someone walks away from this conversation with one idea, what should it be?
That supercomputers are not an abstraction. They are the engine room behind the biggest breakthroughs happening right now. New medicines, safer energy, better climate science, smarter AI. The fact that most people don't see them is exactly why they work so well. They're doing the invisible, enormous work. And the people building and running them are trying to solve humanity's hardest problems. That's worth knowing about.
I think that's the best possible note to end on. Thank you so much. This has been one of those conversations that genuinely changes how I see something I thought I understood. If you're watching and you want to go deeper, the links in the description will get you started. We've included some resources on parallel computing basics and where you can actually access HPC tools today. And I'd love to know, what problem would you want to use a supercomputer to solve? Drop it in the comments. I read every one.
That's a brilliant question to put to people. I'm curious to see what they say.